Welcome to Voices of Introspection, a podcast by Nexus Diaries where we explore the creative workings of human mind that lead us to the depths of self-discovery. I'm your host Harini Balachandar. Today, we are diving into the powerful world of active listening with veteran Delaware Valley radio personality and podcast coach Rich DeSisto. For decades, Rich has been engaging audience through his authentic voice and masterful communication skills. Now, as the founder of podcoach.net, he helps small businesses leverage the power of podcasting through storytelling techniques that foster genuine connection. In this first part of two-part conversation, we'll explore Rich's journey from a curious child with a transistor radio hidden under his pillow to becoming a respected voice in the industry. We'll uncover how active listening shaped his career and how it can transform your professional and personal relationships. Ready to discover how being present in conversation can be your greatest asset? Let's begin. Rich, I'm thrilled that you could join us today. Let's start by having you share about yourself with our audience. Where were you born and how was it growing up for you?
Well, I was born in Yonkers, New York, and we stayed there for a few years of my early years in life, and we decided to go to a safer area in central New Jersey. So pretty much grew up in that area. Exit 8, if all the Jerseyans know, what exit are you from? So the Freehold, Princeton area. Yeah, so had a good childhood in that area. I'm glad that we moved from Yonkers. At the time, Yonkers was not a safe neighborhood. So my mom and dad did right by us and brought us to that area, which looking back on it, it was an amazing childhood. When you're in it, you don't really realize because you don't have anything to compare it to. As a kid, you don't understand what that means anyway. But looking back on it, I mean, we kind of knew as we were growing up, the neighborhood, even my friends, that this was kind of special. This suburban little area that we were growing up in. It was just a situation where you could, as a kid, as mom and dads back then said, "Go out, get outside, go do something, go have fun, go play." We didn't lock our car doors, we didn't lock our house doors. I mean, it was just one of those kinds of neighborhoods, and it was filled with kids. I mean, there was kids everywhere, and everybody knew everybody's business. There was baseball leagues, softball leagues, barbecues. Everybody sat out in front of their porch and congregated. There were parking lot parties. I mean, it was just a fun kind of atmosphere. And for a kid, it just seemed like it was an everlasting party, a fun time. And we all really used it and enjoyed it. And now looking back on it, we really appreciate it. And we're very grateful that our parents brought us to that neighborhood.
And how big is your family? Tell us about your siblings.
I'm the middle kid of three. So I have an older brother and a younger brother, all boys.
Sounds like you grew up in a pretty lively household. Being the middle child between two brothers, did you ever feel like you needed to make yourself heard? Or were your parents fairly balanced in giving attention to all three kids?
I think in a way you always feel like you need to have a little more attention, as a kid, because you're trying to learn, you're trying to figure out things, and you want that help. At least for me, I always ask questions, and sometimes that still gets me into trouble. But I learned along the way that listening also helps you learn rather than just asking. But I was pretty in tune with my inner self at a very young age. I remember, really thinking about things in a way, again, at the time, you don't realize that it's any different. You think everybody's, doing this. But looking back, I think I had a connection to my inner self at a much younger age that helped me focus, I think, a little bit better as I matured as to what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be as an adult, in this life. And at a very early age, I started to realize and gravitate towards an industry that caught my attention in a big way at 8 years old. And who does that? And I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do. And lo and behold, it ended up being exactly what I'm doing.
That's fascinating that at just 8 years old, you already recognized where your passion lay. Most people just spend decades trying to discover their purpose. What guided you during those formative years? Did you have mentors or teachers who nurtured the inner voice, drawing you to broadcasting?
Yeah, so it's funny, I wonder if in life how things kinda happen, right? If it was already written, because the high school that I went to, Hightstown High School, at the time, they had a class called videography, and this class was an elective class, so it really wasn't part of the normal, schedule of classes. It was something that you could get just for extra credits, and it just so happened that in that videography class, radio was something that they were teaching. So it was also video, teaching you how to be a performer in front of the camera, behind the camera, editing. And back then it was still videotape. It wasn't the digital age as we're talking about the early 80s. But also clay animation, which was amazing to learn. But the radio part of it, I knew immediately in my teenage years that yes, this is what I wanted to really learn about because of my influence of wanting to follow that path from being 8 years old listening to the radio. It was listening to the Yankees baseball games at night, which was forced upon me by my parents because at 8 years old, you're not allowed to stay up late to watch the end of the games. I had the radio under my pillow and the little earpiece in my ear leaning in the pillow. They didn't say, "Go listen." I snuck it. They didn't know. No, yeah, I had so they had no idea. It was just loud enough for me to hear it. And I would probably fall asleep within the next hour or so of it anyway, so it was no harm, but engaged in the game, and I still felt like I got the win because I was still able to enjoy the game for the evening. But if the battery didn't run out, I woke up that next morning to that other radio show. So I would listen to them on my transistor radio, fall asleep to them, and then in the morning, I would hear something totally different than the ball game. It would be the normal radio station's morning show, and that's really what caught my attention. So from that point, I'm like, "Yeah, I wanna learn more about this." So I took this class, which you really weren't supposed to take more than 3 years, but I got so good at it that they let me take it for every year of my high school, participation. So it was awesome. Every Friday, we put on a fake radio show for the rest of the, classes that were part of that program, and I got my first introduction to radio. But along those educational lines, in my free time, I was also involved in, DJing private parties on the weekend, so a mobile disc jockey, weddings, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, sweet 16s, retirement parties, all these things. And I got that position through meeting somebody who was on the radio in my neighborhood who owned this mobile DJ company. So I gravitated towards him, became his helper. He taught me the ropes. Some of the other staff that he had on his roster that were doing other parties were also on the radio. So I would meet up with them. And this is kind of like my first introduction to networking, right? Again, you don't know what you're doing, you just do it, you feel like it's the right thing to do, and I was learning, and I was asking questions, but I was also listening, and one of the gentlemen, that I went out to do parties with ended up being the, program director who ended up hiring me for my first radio job. But the gentleman who started the company, Steve Trevelise, he has been my mentor from the start. I mean, when I was first introduced to him, I was so excited to talk to him about what my goals were, what I wanted to do, why I wanted to do it. And he noticed that and he taught me a lot. Teaming me up with the other gentleman, Tom Cunningham, that taught me a lot and opened up that door to audition to be his shadow on his radio show, and then proving that I can handle it at least in a very introductory way. That he had the confidence that he could put me on the radio, and lo and behold, he did, and I did the overnight shift for that station for 2 years.
It sounds like you had an incredible support network that helped elevate you throughout your journey. Looking back from your childhood, from that moment when you secretly listened to baseball games under your pillow, all the way to achieving your goals, what role did active listening play in your development?
Well, I label myself as an introvert. Um, the irony is that in the field that I'm in, there is no introvert there's no room for an introvert. You need to be outgoing. You need to be in the public eye. But I think my radio career helped me through that feeling and that position and that posture, positively, through the years. But because I felt like an introvert in the early years, and again, not realizing what that meant, I just knew I wanted to be independent. I wanted to be by myself. Um, I listened a lot, and I was always a fly on the wall. I was always absorbing what was being talked about from with my parents, their friends, my relatives, my older brother. He's 5 years older than me, so there was a lot in between in terms of where I was in my life always, and the things that he was going through were much more advanced than where I was in my life, so I was kinda listening to all that and listening to the radio, listening to that ball game, listening to that morning show when I woke up. Again, it's the listening that created this idea and put thoughts of positivity and earning for, a goal to reach. It was all of that, I think, that really played a major role in the foundation of who I became. And, some people say, be careful with the quiet ones," right? Even through my
Mhm.
career, I would attend meetings and not be the first one to speak. I would always be listening, always trying to absorb what other people were saying, whether I agreed with it or not, just to kind of form my own baseline as to what the conversation was being
Last person to raise your hand.
last person to raise my hand, even if I did at all. There would be times where I just sat in that room and didn't say a word, and I kind of felt like, I need to participate. They're not gonna think I care or I'm just, mailing it in. But I stuck to my gut and sometimes didn't say a word because I benefited more by just listening than being part of the conversation. But don't get me wrong, there were times where my curiosity got the best of me, and then I would ask, and sometimes I ask too many questions, and it gets me into trouble. But it's that yin and the yang, it's too much listening, not enough asking, or too much asking, not enough listening. But as I got older, I realized the difference between the two, and I use both tools to my advantage depending on the situation. But I always fall back on listening because you learn a lot more, not only for yourself, but about other people. You learn about what other people are feeling, saying, what they're looking to do. And as an instructor, as a mentor myself, that is a very important characteristic to have because you can't help somebody if you don't know what it is that they're saying. If they're not saying they need help, you can't help them get help. So listen very closely, listen between the lines, listen to what they're not saying, because sometimes what they don't say reveals a lot about what they need. So there's a lot of technique in that I've learned through the years as well. And a lot of it is trial and error. A lot of it is just, learning by listening and seeing and react and how others react to something else that they're listening to see the results of that process. And it's just, again, it could be a little bit of watching as well, but it's just sitting back and letting it all happen and absorbing. And if most of it is listening, so be it. If most of it is watching, so be it. But there's a lot to be learned by just being. And I take full advantage of that when I can.
I see there's a beautiful irony here. Someone from the radio world where speaking is essential, but emphasizing the importance of listening. How do you balance these seemingly opposite skills in your work? Does active listening help you establish a deeper connection with your audience?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even in an interview process, right? Um, you might, as an interviewer, have a set of questions to ask somebody. And as an interviewer on the radio, that's how I prep. That's how I prep for podcasts. I'm sure that's how you prep for your podcast as well. So you have an idea of what you want to talk about. You have an idea of what you're going to ask, but sometimes the answer isn't quite exactly what you were expecting. And it might take you down a different path where you need to spontaneously ask something else. But if you don't listen to that answer fully, you're going to miss that opportunity to bring up something else that you did not expect. I've watched some interviews in the past where the interviewer did not listen to the answer. They were just expecting the answer to be whatever and then went on to the next question, missing an opportunity for a conversation to take place. For me, I don't look at an interview as an interview. I try not to label it as an interview because it becomes more rigid and robotic. To me, it's a conversation. If I'm going to interview a famous celebrity, whether it be somebody in a movie on TV or a musician, I try not to say, I'm going to do an interview. I try to use the word conversation because that makes it a lot more friendlier, not only to the way it's perceived or communicated, but the audience can then maybe form with intention from my perspective, the idea that I know this person, that we converse more often than just that one moment in time, and that brings up the level of integrity, brings up the level of trust and the engagement that could happen with them listening to that conversation whenever that actually takes place. So it's kind of a little bit of a mind trick, but it's designed intentionally to spark more attention from the listener to be more engaged with that conversation or the interview, to be able to take and to hear more of it than what they might just pick up if it wasn't colored so much in that kind of picture, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. That's a powerful insight, Rich. So, reframing interviews as conversations to create a more authentic connection. I love how you emphasize that listening helps you discover the story rather than simply conducting a panel discussion with predetermined questions, right? You mentioned earlier something that really resonated with me about listening to what's not being said. Could you share how you approach those unspoken cues?
Hmm.
How do you recognize and address what someone might be holding back?
I can't pinpoint one specific, but just, uh, in general, just from many different instances, you form an opinion or you form uh, a, a direction that you want to go in when you start picking up on that particular moment that somebody is trying to explain to you something or they're speaking to you about something, and it's not what they're saying that you're paying attention to. I'm sorry, it's not. Yeah, it's not what they're saying that you're paying attention to. It's what they're not saying. And sometimes, depending on the situation, you might want to probe, you might want to ask that additional question to say, well, you said this, but what about something else that might be connected to whatever their thought was? And they might not be intentionally forgetting or misleading or not bringing up what they're not saying. It's just, it's not within their visual, connection to whatever that thought is in their mind, and they're missing out on that. They're missing it. So sometimes the probing could inspire or, bring out whatever it is that they're not saying. And sometimes when that does happen, you can see the light bulb go off in their eyes. It's like, "Oh, now I see what you're saying," right? But if that's not how far it goes and it's something that I just take with me and use that to help them reach the goals that they're trying to reach, I might come back with a game plan or a strategy that will incorporate what they're not saying. And I try not to make it my idea. I try to create it in a way that they look at it as if they brought it up or that they initiated it, because then it becomes much more personal to them, and the energy that will be put behind going down that path will be um, uh, much more viable and much more um, uh, intimate for them, the ownership of it, that I think it'll help the process. But it does come up a lot where, somebody will be talking to me about what they want to do, and it could be a student that I teach at the media center where, they've got all these ideas, but what their main focus was, and then I can see that, yeah, well, you mentioned this, that, and the other. I think you're thinking a little different here. You wanna go down this path, and they'll be like, "Oh, yes, you're right. That's exactly what I'm talking about." So sometimes it's a little bit of confusion in the way they're looking at things, but I try to identify immediately when I'm talking to somebody in a mentoring or teaching situation to see if there are some clues that are being brought to the conversation, that the subject or the student is not focusing on, and they should be, because it is really what their intent is. And once I recognize that and I bring it to their attention in a way that makes them feel, like I said, that they have ownership of it, it makes the process much easier for them to, get through those obstacles of not seeing it, obviously, but also being able to put a target on the wall and doing everything they can to reach that goal.
So you're helping them connect the dots and identify what might be missing, either because they are unaware of it or confused about it.
Yeah, it's kinda like the interview process that I mentioned
Mhm.
a bit ago, where you have your set of questions, right? My
Mhm.
student will have a set of ideas, of perspective of what they think they wanna do based on their listening, based on their learning, their watching. They've come to the moment with these ideas, these painted pictures in their mind as to what it is, and then they'll express it. They'll explain it to me, but they might be off a little bit because the information they received by listening or watching is not specific to what they think it is, and they're speaking to somebody who might have a little bit more of a clearer picture of the path that they need to go down to be able to achieve what I'm picking up on what their goals are. So with the interview, if you ask a question and you don't listen to the answer and you just move on to question 2 without probing from that previous answer that might open the door to something else that you didn't think about in the beginning, then you're missing an opportunity to really guide somebody in a way that could be fruitful, regardless of what the situation is.
Gotcha, got it. You coach them through discovering those minor pieces, but in a way that gives them ownership of the insight. That's a remarkable approach to mentorship, Rich. Wow, what a fascinating journey into the power of active listening with Rich DeSisto. In this first part of our conversation, we have discovered how Rich's natural curiosity and ability to absorb information helps shape his successful career in radio and podcasting. The lesson that stands out most clearly is that sometimes what isn't said carries more weight than what is. By being fully present in conversation and attuned to both verbal and nonverbal cues, we can uncover deeper insights and forge stronger connections. Join us for part 2, where we'll explore how Rich applies these listening skills in his work as a podcast coach and how you can leverage these techniques in your own communication. Thank you for listening to Voices of Introspection by Nexus Diaries, where we help you share your story with clarity and impact. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and connect with us at nexusdiaries.com. Until next time, I'm Harini Balachandar, encouraging you to listen, really listen, to the voices around you and within you.